Was really quite inspiring, thank you. Now we're going to welcome for a chat our panellists, Tom Copley, Deputy Mayor for Housing and Regen at the GLA, in my seat, Tom.
Oh.
Just kidding. Councillor Grace Williams, Leader of Waltham Forest Council and Deputy Chair of London Councils. Hi, Grace. And Henrique Joaquim, National Coordinator of the National Strategy for the Social Inclusion of Homeless People in Portugal. And as we heard this morning, political leadership is absolutely critical to our ability to end homelessness, and how political leaders can really take a lead in driving prevention is going to be part of what we talk about just now. Thank you all for coming. So Tom, I wanted to start with you really to talk about the Mayor's plan of action to end rough sleeping, if that's okay. I know that in the plan of action there's a lot more recognition of the fact that doing more for single homeless people before they get to that point of crisis is really critical. And can you just tell us a bit more about the plans in that regard in London?
Yeah, thank you very much, Michelle. Prevention is absolutely key here. And as part of the Mayor's rough sleeping plan of action, we had a real focus on putting prevention at the heart of what we're doing, but also not losing sight of the fact that we still need to have that response when people find themselves in crisis and when people find themselves on the streets. But I think it's worth just thinking about the figures to start with. So nearly 2/3 of the people who slept rough in London in the last year, it was their first night out. They'd not spent a night on the street before. They may well not have any sort of complex needs. They may well not have any addiction problems. It's quite possible that the reason why they're on the street is something has just gone wrong in their lives. Maybe they've lost their job. Maybe they've had a breakdown in a relationship. And if we can find those people and prevent those people from becoming homeless in the first place, what it does is it frees up our ability to help the really entrenched rough sleepers, the people who are living on the streets, the people who do really have very high support needs. So that's why we've had this real sort of focus on this. And the ways we're doing this, there's a number of ways we're doing this. And I mean, the first thing I should say is we are working very, very closely with London councils. And so Grace and I co-chair what we're now calling the Ending Homelessness Accelerator programme. This brings together London councils and the GLA, and it looks at homelessness broadly. It's not just about rough sleeping. Rough sleeping is a very key part of that, but it sits within looking at things like temporary accommodation and stuff like that. But what we're doing is looking at how we build prevention into all of this. So through our Ending Homelessness hubs, for example, having the ability for people who are not yet rough sleeping, but who are at risk of rough sleeping to be helped through those. We're testing through StreetLink London a prevention telephone line and things like that. So this is about how we really build that capacity while not losing sight of the fact we still do need to be able to help people on the streets when they end up on the streets.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, you mentioned temporary accommodation, Tom, as a sort of critical problem facing the capital. I mean, the country, but the capital in particular. Yeah. And Grace, we know that councils are spending huge sums of money on temporary accommodation, and that while a shift towards prevention will save money and save misery, it must seem challenging in the situation that councils are in right now. I suppose I'm interested, what do you think that councils could do more of to make a bit of a shift towards prevention in this current situation?
Michelle, and I think I'm using this, so I hope that works, and it's because I arrived a bit late, so sorry about that. Yeah, I mean, I think Tom's right that what's really important about the programme that we're talking about, Ending Homelessness Accelerator, is it is a system response and it is looking across the piece. But one of the things that we really know that we need to focus on in that is temporary accommodation. And actually, we always talk about temporary accommodation. What we really mean is families that are in housing need who want a permanent home. So that's the challenge, is how do we work together to prevent housing need, and how do we build more homes? And what's really difficult is we're talking about this a lot together, because we know that the only way we're going to solve it is by working closely together. But the last time we had this conversation, I think we were talking about local authorities spending £4 million a day, and now they're spending 5.5 million. So it's an absolute crisis, and it's an absolute crisis for those families that are living for months or years in accommodation that's not meeting their needs, you know, whether that's in terms of play or their health and well-being, or being able to get to a job, or being able for their child to go to school. And it's an absolute crisis for local authorities because we can't afford to spend that money. So, for example, in our borough, we have an overspend of £20 million on our spending for families in housing need who we're temporarily housing, and that's replicated across the capital. So, because those costs are so high, we absolutely fundamentally have to work together to find a response. And I think maybe the thing that's quite challenging is that it's coming on top of lots of things we have already tried. So we've worked together very closely with the GLA on, you know, how can we create a housing market which we can afford. So London councils work together to try to set the costs of that temporary accommodation in London. But in the last few years, with the pandemic and with the contraction of the private rental market, that doesn't work anymore. So I'm sitting here thinking, we absolutely need to do this, but it's really tough. So I really welcome a proper conversation and the homelessness programme, which will look at actual solutions that work now, not in the society we would all like to build, where we all have homes for all Londoners.
Yeah, fair. Thank you, Grace. And Henrique, Portugal's national strategy has a very strong focus on prevention, I think it's fair to say. Can you tell us about this policy shift towards prevention and what it means in the way the country's tackling homelessness?
Okay, first of all, thank you for inviting me as a representative for one of the most southern European countries, so far away, near Spain. I'm very pleased to be here. Well, briefly, our history is something like that. We have the first attempt to have a national strategy in 2009, but all the process was interrupted because the crisis, and we only have a national strategy since 2017 because we launched in 2015 a social movement to pressure our government. And when we gained the political commitment for our president, yes, in 2016, we gained the political attention, and in 2017 we have the first strategy. And this first strategy was a first attempt to change the mindset. And I think it's important the first step is to changing the mindset. And the mindset to change is from an assistantialist answer to a political answer. In 2017, we have a strategy based on an housing-led approach, based on the main principle of housing first, because we believe we need tailor-made responses. And the problem was, since 2017 to 2020, the results are practical zero. In 2020, the government changed the governance of the national model and starts to have a person only centered to manage the national strategy and try to implement and try to finance the housing first model and to implement the shared housing model we call shared apartments. Are small units with 2 to 5 people per unit, but in housing first and in housing led with a support team with a social worker and a mediator to support each person. But now we have a new strategy. And this new strategy have, I think, too many goals. To consolidate the first approach, the housing-led approach, but yes, we start now to put the main focus on prevention. Because it's obvious, but without prevention without data, we are blind, and we are doing the same. For me, the question is, we need to invest to have a seat belt, is obvious, or to have an ambulance. What you prefer? Or in a different way or a similar way, if we don't have seat belts now, and in Portugal, the seat belts is only mandatory since 30 years ago, not so long. But if we don't have seat belts, how many costs we have in care and emergency? Well, I think the political commitment is very, 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 very important because I said we change and we have a national strategy when the president was committed with the social movement, when the government in national terms and in local terms was committed. And now I think it's important also to give ownership on the ground. I deal all my days, not today, but maybe and next week when I arrive in Portugal, on my days I deal with 4, 5, 10 municipalities each day to implement an action plan, to implement measures, to monitorize measures. I think it's important to deal in national terms, but also to have the commitment, the political commitment in local terms. Without this commitment, I think it's possible, but it's more heavy to change the mindset.
Thank you. It's interesting when you think about what Michael Barber was saying this morning, I guess, about that one person that holds the ring and really drives it forward with that clarity of purpose. I suppose, Tom, when the government came into power, current government, there was a lot of talk about the role of metro mayors in this kind of space and what the benefits might be from metro mayors getting more involved in supporting local councils to get better outcomes. I mean, how do you think you can support London's boroughs, and what impact do you think can be achieved by greater devolution?
I'm, as you might expect from someone who works in London Regional Government, very pro devolution.
I'd be worried if you said something different.
I'm not going to shock you there. And actually, I think that we can provide a bit of a model, perhaps, for the rest of the for other metro mayors in the rest of the country, because we've been doing this for a while now, and the GLA has been commissioning services that complement what boroughs do and other services that make sense to do on a pan-London level. So, we're commissioning immigration advice, for example. We commissioned a chain database, which I think we might come on to talk about as well. Various services that it makes sense to do at a pan-London level that perhaps wouldn't make sense at a borough level. What we're also trying to do under the plan of action is also move more as well towards a sub-regional model, because there are things that perhaps don't make sense to do at pan-London level, but also boroughs can't do individually, and that's why having groups of boroughs, and we've got 5 sub-regions in London, might make more sense in terms of how we commission certain services. As part of the Mayor's Rough Sleeping Plan of Action as well, we've also committed £17 million of additional funding, both for the Ending Homelessness hubs that I mentioned before. We've currently got 4 of those, and we are actively looking now to purchase a building to house a 5th, so that we have 1 for each of those sub-regions. And we're also expanding what was called Clearinghouse, now we're calling Homes Off the Streets, an additional up to 500 units of accommodation to help people move off the streets. So, I think that there's a lot that we can do as the Mayor, as the GLA, to support what the boroughs are doing in London, and I think that will only strengthen under the Plan of Action and the Ending Homelessness Accelerator.
Thanks, Tom. You weren't here this morning, but we heard from Erin that they did 500 homes in 500 days, but no pressure. No pressure at all. Grace, I suppose same question really. What do you think local authorities need from metro mayors, and how do you think London councils, as that sort of umbrella body for London, local government can also help support ending homelessness?
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. I mean, Tom and I work together a lot, and I think, you know, the most important thing is that we both have, and London councils and the mayor has a shared commitment to tackling this and making this our first priority. And I'm sure everyone in this room probably agrees with us that this is the crisis that we have to address. And what we have to do as leaders in London is persuade not only everyone else in the capital of that, but everyone else outside London who sometimes presents it as a kind of us and them thing between London and the rest of the country. You know, ultimately, unless London solves its housing emergency, then the national pressures cannot be solved. So that's important. So, but devolution is important because it's about structures, it's about power, and it's about integrating resources. So that's why it matters for this challenge. And what I'm really proud about, and Tom's spoken about some of it already, is that it's in the housing area in London that we are showing that shared partnership regardless of what our structures are. We've talked a bit about the accelerator, but the other thing that Tom and I are doing together is the housing mission. So we have a shared mission across London where we're working with the housing sector, London boroughs, the GLA, and the government to look at the real problems and solve them. So those are things like, what can we do to deliver more homes? How can we accelerate? I'm going to go into some quite technical terms, build out rates. How can we actually unlock private investment that we need? And how can we do that within the regulatory framework we've got? So I think devolution is important. Leadership and commitment is more important. And what we're going to need now, and what's really helpful about the government's approach to devolution, is they're making it easier for us to integrate our resources, and we are responding by having a more flexible and a more adaptive response to those challenges.
Fantastic. I'm going to open up for questions in a minute. Just one more for you, Henrique, if I may, and then get your questions ready for the panel. I suppose we got very excited about the idea of a new homelessness strategy. You talked about yours, and we always do. And I think two things we heard this morning about what was exciting about it is, one, it was about focusing on all forms of homelessness, the one that we're going to get in the autumn, but also this idea of cross-departmental, interministerial sort of working together to tackle what is not always a housing problem. How effective is interministerial work in respect of homelessness prevention in Portugal? Is there wide sort of coalition of support from across the spectrum of government departments, you know, justice, health, housing, working together? Can we learn from that in some way?
Well, this commission, in our framework, we have this commission, the national coordination, and also the local unities. And this commission is led by Social Security Ministry, but we have also a representative from Justice, Education, Health, and also housing. And we have also to deal with many public bodies from health, from mental health, from the prison system. And our main goal is to breaking down the silos. Homelessness is a complex issue, and if we put the person on the center, is very complex. And one answer, housing or healthcare, is a holy solution. Don't solve the problem. We need to have an integrated approach, and our services are not prepared to do this. Is very huge to ask, for example, to have a house to a housing first project or a shared apartment, but I need also the mental health services to support people. I need a case manager on the local teams, because it's supposed each person with a case manager, and with each person with an individual plan. And to do this is the challenge is very, very, very hard to, how we integrate all of these with the main goal is to give to this person the adapted answer and to gain the autonomy. The interministerial commission is very, very important because it's on this place where we can put the problems and when we can decide some different ways to go or different answers to give to the real problems or the local problems. The small unities or the local unities are based on agreements. We have now 38 municipalities with specific teams. The majority are coordinated by the municipality, but in this partnership agreement signs also the NGOs, the local and public bodies, all the partners allowed to solve the local problem. And for me, I think is the most important piece of our strategy is to have a local team with a political local commitment, but with a personalized answer and a personalized and integrated approach.
Thank you. Really interesting. Yeah. Okay, hands up. Any questions for our panel? Do we have a roving mic? We do. I can see Alice. This one here. Thank you. Any more? Oh yeah, the back there.
Hiya, my name's Amelia from Enfield Council, Homeless Section. I'm just wondering whether, like Tom and Grace, whether you're paying much attention to people that are being moved out of borough. We're placing homeless families, we're discharging our duty into private rented sector out of the borough. What work, if anything's been done about that? You know, we're doing a great job in Enfield. We've got, you know, we're getting our prevention done and everything. But a lot of that, we're sending clients out of the borough into PRS, private rented sector. And especially like for single people, you know, who may, you know, they may not have any support somewhere, you know, in Kent or wherever. But, you know, as far as we're concerned, we've discharged our duty. You know, what are the implications for those people further along the line? Yes, we've stopped them going into temporary accommodation, but really, have we really done a good enough job? And whether there's much work that's going to be done, you're looking into that at all? I just think it's a big problem. We're sending families and individuals all over the place, and I think it's going to come and bite us later on.
Thank you. I'll take a couple more questions, then we'll come back, give you a chance to think. Alex, at the back there. Alex. Alex keeps moving his seat just to confuse us. Yeah.
Thank you. I feel like I keep grabbing the microphone. Sorry about that. Alex Bax from Pathway, the Homeless Inclusion Health Charity. Just thinking, so our view would be that health is implicated very often in both routes into homelessness and in preventing homelessness across the board. We talked about political leadership. Do you think you are seeing, as London's political leaders, perhaps enough engagement from the NHS in helping with your mission and visions? And if not, are you doing enough to put pressure on the NHS, either in your locality or London-wide, to get it to do more? Because there's a lot of good evidence about what it could and should do, but certainly my view is it's not doing enough.
Thanks, Alex. And one more. Where? Oh yeah, the back there. Alex, behind you.
Thank you. I'm Mark from Just Life. I suppose my question is how do political leaders prioritise work that requires timeframes that are longer than the political voting schedule? Because that seems to be a constant challenge, that housing is something that you can't solve in a 4-year or 5-year term.
I wanted to ask that question about the Pharaoh this morning, whether he was on a 5-year political cycle. You missed that anecdote about the Pharaoh this morning and how good he was at planning for famine. So, do you want to start?
Yeah, so out of borough placements first, and thanks for the question, and thank you for the work you're doing on the front line in Enfield, which is our neighbouring borough. And you'll know what I'm going to say to you. So first of all, it's really important we're clear why it's happening. So that has all kinds of answers, but let's sort of explore some of them. It's happening because people can't afford to live in London. why can't people afford to live in London? They can't afford to live in London because the cost of living is going up and people's employment cost is not meeting that. So, for example, the Joseph Rowntree Foundation has just updated its figures on the minimum income that you need. This is nationally, actually. And they say a two-parent household needs, I think it's about 74,000. And in my borough, the median income is 80,000. So that shows you the challenge straight away. Cost of living is going up. People's jobs are not paying enough. There's not enough homes. So what we have to do is we have to look really carefully at what we mean by prevention. We have to have a model that builds strength in our communities, builds jobs, builds skills, and also manages the market. We need to do those things. But we also need to be realistic that if a borough has a 20 million overspend, then it's not going to be able to house those that rightly want to stay in their local community in London. It just won't be able to do it. We have to balance our budget. So we also have to make sure that we have an honest conversation that says that, you know, in London, we have lots of people that need a home. We're working as hard as possible. We only place people outside London as a last resort because we're trying to provide people with settled homes. We need to work together on the things that we can control, and we need to work together on the support offer. But I cannot sit here and say to you that in the next 4 years, all those families that we have in London, that we have it within our power to find places for them in London. We have to push hard with government, which I can guarantee we are all the time. So, you know, we're asking for an increase in resources for house building, an increase in resources for the temporary accommodation subsidy. We're asking for an increase in prevention money, and that will help, but we have to be clear what the scale of the problem is and where we can take the most effective action. That's just on that. I don't know if you wanted to come in.
I think you've covered that one very well, Grace. And look, and London in particular, local authorities are in the most unenviable position imaginable at the moment. I mean, you heard from Grace earlier. I often open by saying councils are spending 4 million a week on temporary accommodation. Well, now I'm going to have to revise that up to days. Now I'm going to have to revise that up to £5.5 million pounds a day. And I know that councils in London are working as hard as they can on this, as hard as they can not to place people out of borough and out of London. But to go back to what Grace was saying about the mission board that we chair, we are really, really pushing between ourselves and the government to get what we need. But we know it is going to take time to turn around what is an oil tanker in terms of the housing crisis that we've got. So that's all I wanted to say on that one. I'm happy to come in. Yeah,
do you want to talk about the political leadership question or about the health issue? Yeah.
So on health, Alex, we've got on our Ending Homelessness Delivery Board, we've got Dr. Tom Coffey, the Mayor's health advisor. We are absolutely clear that as part of this, the NHS has to play a role, and as part of that prevention work, we are reviewing in terms of the prevention that we can do in terms of health, in terms of prison leavers and other institutional leavers as well. It has to be an absolutely vital part of what we're doing together. And on the point about political cycles, one of the reasons why I'm so in favour of devolution, and that doesn't just mean devolution to the mayor, by the way, it means devolution to the right level of London government, is that I think that we are better able as a city to come together and deal with some of these challenges, because we can have a real focus on some of the biggest challenges that we've got that might be slightly different or slightly greater than elsewhere in the country. And I think that the structures that we have set up between us are, to an extent, able to weather some of those political cycles. And I think that's a real strength of the structures that we are setting up in London. And we have to have a long-term view. Yes, we have to be able to have a focus on doing what we can to sort out things as quickly as possible, but we do have to have, and I think we do have as part of this, a long view. The one area where I will say I think that the sort of the one parliamentary cycle is actually quite useful in terms of focusing minds, is the government's commitment to 1.5 million homes within this parliament. Actually, I think there can be some benefits there in terms of having a real clear deadline to deliver a real tangible benefit.
Thank you. Is there anything else?
Just to add on the sort of the longevity point, you know, how do we get these things done? I mean, I think Tom's completely right. I sometimes think I'm nearly 50 years old. This housing crisis is 50 years old. So one of the challenges we've got is how do we work on different timescales at the same time, so that we're actually able to up the amount of homes that we build now and work on prevention now. 2 years will be too late. It has to be now. But how do we also build in what the system should look like? And that's why the mission-based approach is so important, because it's about us working out with the housing sector and government, what are we going to need for the city over the next 50 years' time? And I'm really interested in approaches, and perhaps Portugal is an example of this, but I think Wales is as well, where they've looked at what's needed for future generations. Because if we think about it, that's who we need to be focused on. You know, the 1 in every 21 children in a classroom, and the impact, as we heard earlier from Lorna, on a child's life. So how do we build in measures of improved outcomes for that child that's in temporary accommodation now? So it's a challenge, because we would probably want to start 50 years ago on this. But given where we are, we need those two kinds of timescales to be able to deal with this crisis.
Thank you so much. And I think we're just about on time, so I think we're going to end it there. So a round of applause, if you don't mind, for our panellists.
Thank you.